There is a lot of discourse online about whether women are even wanting to have children anymore. Should you have kids young? Should you wait till you're older? Should you even have children at all? And a lot of this discourse is surrounding the idea that children are an inconvenience, that they take away your freedom, and that they are not worth the sacrifices that come with becoming a parent. There is a lot of noise around the conversation of having children young, and as a young mom, I'm here to give you my perspective. Is it worth it to have kids in general, and is it worth it to have kids young? Welcome to the Live It Loud podcast. My name is Maya. I'm a 23-year-old wife, mom, advocate for life. In this podcast, we talk about all things culture, faith, motherhood, history, you name it. We've been talking about it. We've been getting into some pretty interesting topics here on the podcast. I did take a little bit of a break from the podcast. This is like my first week back. If you don't know, I post bi-weekly episodes, so every 2 weeks. And I took a break, so it was a month break because I was traveling to visit family, and then my son was sick and we celebrated his first birthday. So it's been kind of a crazy busy time in my life right now, but I love having these conversations with you guys, so it's important to me to make these episodes. So thank you guys for being so patient for this episode to come out, and I'm excited to get into this topic of conversation today. I have some pretty awesome episodes planned out for the future, so make sure that you subscribe so that you can stay with me and we can talk about all of these things that are controversial in the culture right now. So as a young mom, I feel as if I have a perspective that a lot of other young women don't have, because I can speak from experience on if I think having a child is worth it or not. Okay. Now, I only have one kid. I don't have multiple kids yet, but my husband and I plan to have many more kids. And we got married when we were 20. Had my first kid at 22, and I feel like a lot of women who don't have children, who haven't gotten married young, can't really speak to this as much as someone who has the lived experience of it, and so that's why I wanted to get into this podcast episode. And in my opinion, now these, like I said, this is my opinion, this is my perspective, I want to share with you why I feel like so many young women aren't having children anymore, and it's because our culture has shifted the narrative of what is valuable. Right? What is fulfilling? What is life even about? We've shifted from the idea that family and children and being married to one person for life is the most fulfilling life you can live to, your career, what you've achieved, your success in life is more important than the everyday mundane things. And we live in a culture that has shifted from valuing children, and children are the most, valuable thing you can contribute to society, to now children are something that you have when you can fit them into your life once everything else is complete. Once you've completed your success, you've accomplished your career goals, you've gone through the college, you have, a stable marriage, which is obviously something that's very important. But I'm just saying, culture tells us to wait until every little thing is perfect before you have children. Right? That you need to live your life before you have children, and that children are just something that fits into your life once everything else is done, that they are a sidebar. They're not the main purpose and point of life. They are just like an extra added thing. And there's some truth to that, but I do want to speak into this in a little bit. What if this timeline of waiting for children, of waiting until your life is this perfect cookie cutter, copy paste life as the other people around you, what if this timeline isn't actually setting you up for fulfillment, but what if it's quietly robbing you of fulfillment? Now, I know you're going to say, Maya, come on, girl. You want to have an established career, you want to have all this stuff, be a girl boss babe before you have kids. And of course, it is important to provide your children with stability. I'm not saying if you're not married and you're broke to have kids. Absolutely not. You should be married when you have kids, number one, because that's God's design. That is God's best for you, is to have children in the protection of marriage. And of course, you should be able to feed your kids if you're going to have kids. I'm not saying that you should go have kids immediately. This is saying when the time is right for you and you feel like God's giving you the green light, you shouldn't have to wait to have children. If you're young and you're in a position where you're stable and you're ready to have children, you should have children if that's what you feel like God's calling you to do. And I want to tell you why I feel this way and why I kind of go against the culture when it comes to this conversation of having children, and why I think that despite all of the fears and objection that culture will give you around having children, that it's actually something that's worth it and not something to fear. And why having children young can actually be one of the most worthwhile decisions that you can make. I'm aware that everyone's life is different, okay? Your desires, your needs, the things that God has called you to do. Not everyone is called to become a parent young, and I do want to be sensitive to that. Not everyone can have kids young, right? And I want to make sure I put that out there. This is not saying you need to have kids young. This is listen to that still small voice. Listen to God's call on your life. because ultimately being obedient to him is more important than establishing your career and being a girl boss babe. Being obedient to God before anything else, before culture, before how you feel, is more important than anything else in life. And so, I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. I'm here for someone who may be on the fence, who just wants some perspective. Maybe someone who's considering becoming a parent young. Maybe you're married and you're young and you're deciding, do I want to have kids young or do we want to wait till we're older? These things are based on my personal experience and the joy that I have found that has made young parenthood worth it to me. So here are a few points of why I think becoming a parent young or becoming a parent in general is one of the best choices that I have made. Many of the disputes that I hear about having children young is all of the sacrifices that you have to make, right? You lose sleep, that's undeniable. You have to work your schedule around another person. You got to bring another person with you everywhere. I remember when I first had my son and I had to drag him to the grocery store with me, I was like, man, this is really hard, right? This is a big sacrifice for me. Normal outings that were like a 30-minute outing going to Target is now like a luxury that takes me like 2 hours, right? Not so much anymore that my son is 1. It's a little bit quicker, but I remember when he was first born and I had to pack the diaper bag and I was so exhausted physically from giving birth that it became like a luxury to me, right? It was a big sacrifice for me. And, you have to give up your body for another person. That's another big sacrifice that people talk about. They don't want their body to be stretched out. And then not only that, pregnancy, right? Your body completely changes. But if you decide to breastfeed, that's a whole nother year, which I wasn't prepared for, of sacrificing your body for your child. I've just come up on a year of breastfeeding and pumping. And let me tell you, man, I was not ready for that. That was a huge commitment, a big sacrifice that I had to make that I felt was worth it, but it was a big sacrifice, that I feel like I didn't really know much about, that nobody really told me. People just said it would be, oh, you're going to bond with your baby and feed them, it's beautiful and whatever, but it is also a huge sacrifice that you have to make. And then, the other dispute that I hear is you have to give up your supposed freedom, right? I guess it depends on what you define freedom as, but just for an example of like what culture thinks is freedom, you can't go out without a babysitter, and like you can't go to the club anymore, you can't drink whenever you want to drink, you can't be crazy whenever you want to be crazy, right? That's what culture thinks is freedom. We can talk about how that's actually bondage, but we're not going to get into that today. And I want to tell you that parenthood is undeniably hard. Period. It's hard. It's not easy. There's plenty of sacrifices you're going to have to make. And if you can't do something hard, maybe it's not for you, okay? But I do want to tell you that something being hard doesn't mean that it's not worth it. And I think our culture, because of social media, we have decided that anything that is hard is not worth it. We don't want to sacrifice the convenience that we get, the quick fixes that we get, the quick satisfaction that we get, because it's easier for us to just find satisfaction in things that are easy versus things that are hard. And so that's why I feel like we're seeing so many young women who are deciding not to be parents anymore, so many young people who don't want to have kids, is because we have fallen for this convenience, quick culture of everything has to be easy, everything has to be satisfying. We have to have a quick dopamine rush in order for something to be worth it. We do not like to invest and sacrifice anymore into things that are worthwhile. And our culture is so focused on self-pleasure that we're not willing to sacrifice for our future, for a greater level of fulfillment than just a quick dopamine rush. And so I saw this quote, and I love this quote, and I don't know who it's from because I saw it in a comment section, but it says, living without children may promise you more independence and freedom, but ultimately will never provide you with the purpose and growth that having a child will. Such a great and excellent quote. You may have more independence and freedom, and if that's what you desire more than anything else in life, then maybe don't have kids, right? If you cannot sacrifice for a child, then don't have kids. But if you want to achieve a level of purpose and fulfillment and growth in your life and become a whole new person, a better person, like you will completely change when you have a child, then I think it's totally worth it. And it's so worth it in the long run, the sacrifices that you have to make and the joy and fulfillment that comes from having a child. I wish I could put it into words how much having my son has changed my husband and I's life for the better. The joy that we've experienced, the intimacy that we've experienced since having a child, because when you have that kind of connection with someone, like we're his parents, that kind of intimacy and joy that we have from just seeing him grow and being his parents is just beautiful. And I feel closer to him than I ever have in my life. It's grown our marriage. It has tested our marriage, but it's made us ultimately closer than we've ever been before. And I think that's a beautiful thing about having children is, yes, it just completely changes your life, but it completely changes it in such a beautiful way. And I feel like not enough people talk about that. We always want to talk about the bad things, the sacrifice, all those things. But can we also talk about the positive things about having a child? When you have a child, you will learn so many new things. You will learn to be more flexible, more willing to adjust. You're going to be way less set in your ways. You're going to be uprooted completely, which is horrifying for some people, but for others, it's an extreme way to grow. Sometimes, when you have a plant, and you have this plant in a small pot, right? The root system can only go down so far. So, let's say it's a flower or whatever. The flower can only get so big because the root system is encased in this tiny little pot. But if you repot that flower, if you uproot this plant and put it in a bigger pot with better soil, right? The plant will just grow. And if you would have kept that plant in the smaller pot, you never could have seen the potential or the growth that plant could have had. And that's what I feel like parenthood does to you. It uproots you, it replants you, and you become a more beautiful, full version of yourself that you could never have discovered had you not had children, okay? And so I do want to say that you learn sacrifice, right? Which shapes your long-term character when you become a parent. Kids bring meaning and perspective that nothing else in life does. They will reshape what actually matters in life. And I think any parent can agree with that sentiment. Through children, you will experience a deeper form of unconditional love and gain a perspective that pulls you out of a self-centered mindset. Life with kids is not easy. It is fuller, it's messier, it's louder, but it's ultimately richer and more meaningful because it's not just about comfort. It's not just about convenience and satisfaction. It is about future. It is about purpose. I used to have this huge desire of I want to travel. I want to do all these things all the time. And after I've traveled so much being young, I'm like, man, that's exhausting. It's so fun. It's amazing to check things off the bucket list. But there is nothing more fulfilling than being home with the people that I love. Nothing more fulfilling than that. I would take a weekend home with my husband and my son over a weekend solo traveling somewhere anytime. And I love to travel. Me and my husband love to travel. We love to do things, and I love to have a conversation about having kids. You don't have to put your life on hold. You can continue on in your life, and it just depends on what you make a priority, and I'd love to maybe make an episode about how I make that happen, but I prefer being home so much more now, and it's not because I've limited my mindset. It's that I value my family so much more than I did before I had a child, and it's the same thing with my parents and my siblings and my husband's family. I value time with them so much more because I realize, and when you have children, it really puts life into perspective that life is fleeting. One day you're going to die. That's undeniable. You cannot get around that. We're all going to die one day. And you have to decide what is more important to you, being surrounded by the people that you love or living a life of convenience and self-centeredness. And now I'm not saying that everyone who doesn't have children is living a life of convenience and self-centeredness, but the way that our culture paints having children is oh, well, you can't do all of these self-centered things if you have children. And so that's why I'm kind of contrasting it this way. I'm not trying to make it so extreme on both sides. And so I do want to say, here are some of the things that I found value in having children young. Like I said, valuing time with my family way more. I feel like I have a deeper understanding and perspective for life, but I also have a deeper understanding of God's love for me. I've felt so close to God since I had a child. Giving birth was one of the most amazing connecting experiences with God that I've ever had. And it almost makes me emotional talking about it because feeling his love for me and seeing his love for me, how much he loves me, is just beautiful. And understanding God's unconditional love. Because when I look at my son, I love him so much. I love him so much that I could explode. And he's just sitting there, snot running down his face, just chubby and cute and eating a snack. He's not doing anything, right? He's not acting to try to make me love him. He just sits there and I just love him. And that's how God loves us, is he loves us so unconditionally that he just sits there, and I just imagine God just sitting there looking at us, loving us. And I'm like, wow, that makes me emotional because there's nothing that you can do to earn God's love. And that's something that I've never fully understood, that I thought I understood, but I've understood so much more since I had a child, is that God loves us so unconditionally. And the way that I unconditionally love my child, God loves us so much more than that, which is crazy because I'm I don't feel like there's a greater love than the love I have for my child and for my family, but God loves us so much more. And it's not such a comforting thing. I don't know, that's so comforting to me. And so having a child young, it gave me such a deeper understanding of God's love. And I want to go into some of the actual just physical benefits of having children young and having children in general, is that, if you decide to have children and you want to wait till you're older to have children or something like that, here's why I think it's good to have children young, despite, what culture may say. I think that one thing people don't acknowledge is that energy matters more than people admit, okay? When you're young and you decide to have children, you physically have more stamina for pregnancy, for the newborn stage, and for toddler chaos, okay? You're going to be staying up late at night. You're going to be not sleeping as much, right? You'll have early mornings. You'll have to be constantly moving. And it just is better in your 20s if you have children young than when you're older to have children. You don't realize how much energy parenting takes until you're in it, okay? And that's one of the things why I think that having kids young is better, is because physically you're just going to have a better experience when you have children young. The other thing that is beautiful to me and why I think it's so worth it to have a child young is because I get to grow up with my son. When he's 20, I'm going to be 42, okay? That's pretty young. I would say that's fairly young. And, instead of waiting till I was ready, right, to what culture says is ready to have children, you become ready through the process. Instead of having to adjust kids into my lifestyle, now I can adjust my lifestyle around my kids. My husband and I can make our jobs work better with our children. We're not set in our ways, right? If I had an established career, I can't imagine I'm 30, I have this established career, and now I have to put that all on pause because I want to have a child now. No, now my child gets to fit into my life, and I get to grow up in my career and just as a person in general with my son. He fits into what I'm doing now. I don't have to fit my life around him. He fits into my life perfectly, and I love that. And it's worked well for us. My husband and I, since having a child, have become more successful in our careers. We're making the most money that we've ever made. Not to say that that's true for everyone. Some mothers decide to be stay-at-home moms. I didn't personally choose that route because I like to work. I've been working since I was 13. I've never really known anything different. And so for me, it was important to continue working. I have a job where I work from home. I do social media, and then I teach martial arts. And they're like passion jobs. And I do realize that I'm extremely blessed to have those jobs, that I can fit my child into that life, and that my child can be a part of that. And I know that a lot of people don't have that privilege. And, when it comes to growing up with your child, your identity, your priorities, and maturity, they develop faster and deeper. I am way more of a forgiver now that I've had a child. I don't like to hold things against people. And, I used to be a very bitter person. I'm honestly going to be honest about that. Like when people would do me wrong, I was bitter at them for a long time. And now having a kid and having like a deeper understanding and perspective of life, I'm like, why would I hold that against someone, that they've done me wrong? Like, it's just hurting me more. I just want to forgive and move on and live a peaceful life. It's helped me to be a better forgiver, helped me to be more patient and more kind to others, have more understanding of other people's lives, where I was super impatient before of other people and I was always in a rush. I feel like it's taught me to slow down and just appreciate the day-to-day things so much more. And, it's not like I'm losing my youth by having children young. It's shaping my life with purpose to have a child. And time is my greatest asset, I have more years with my child over my lifetime. I get to be present for more of his adulthood. It's crazy because you only have a certain amount of years where your child is going to be a child. You're going to know them longer as an adult than you're going to know them as a child. And you'll possibly get to be a part of your grandchildren's lives. I know that's not guaranteed because tomorrow isn't guaranteed. But, realistically, if we think about it, when you have children younger, you're going to have more time with them. You're not racing against biology or fertility decline when you have children young. You have more time, right? You get to build your life around family, not try to fit family into a finish line, right? Like career, finances, the things that I was all talking about before, lifestyle decisions, they become more intentional. You don't have to pause a fully built life. You build it with your child in mind because family is your foundation, not an afterthought for your foundation, right? It's not trying to fit like a random room into an already built house. It's already built. The house is built. The foundation is built with your child inside of it already. It's not like building an extra addition. And, I think something we need to talk about, and these are just like points that I've written down, and so that's why I'm kind of like choppy about it, is I'm trying to get across all of my points. But the cultural messaging versus the reality is society pushes freedom first, kids later, but many people end up feeling unfulfilled despite independence. We're reframing what is fulfillment versus what is convenience, like we talked about. And also, like, in addition to that, this is something that's super important that a lot of people don't talk about, is community and support systems look so different when you're young versus when you're older. You're more likely to grow aside other young families. Like, making friends when you're a young parent, I feel like it's difficult. I've had a hard time with it, but I also feel like once you do meet your friends, like your kids get to grow up together and you guys get to grow up together and you have like these lifelong friendships. And I think that's so beautiful. Like a lot of my mom's friends and like my in-laws friends are friends that they had from when they were young parents and they're still friends with today. And I think that's so beautiful because friendships do become more meaningful when you have kids. You know, you have to make more time for them. And so they do become more meaningful and more intentional, you know. You have stronger shared experiences versus isolated later parenting. You know, church/communities often rally around young families. You may have your parents longer when you have kids younger. The help from your family, from your parents, you know, it's so sad to me thinking about how my parents are getting older and how my husband's family, you know, his parents are getting older too. And I'm like, I'm so glad that I had kids young so they can have more time with them. Not that they're going to go anytime soon because they're still very young, but you know, they're getting older compared to when I was a kid. And so it's nice to be able to see them with my son now. And I know that they get to have time together as long as that is. I'm very thankful for that. You know, and you do have more of a community and support system when you have kids young. Now, not that that's for everyone. I know a lot of people maybe don't have great relationships with their family. But it's also up to you to get out of your comfort zone and build a community. When that comes to church, you know, you have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to make friends. You know, you have to build that community for yourself. It's not just going to build itself. And I feel like it's easier when you're younger because you have more energy to build those friendships and get out of the house and do all those kind of things. And then the last point that I had was financial fear versus long-term perspective. Yes, kids cost money. They're expensive. Honestly, I made a little video about this, about like, if you have kids, you can be intentional about saving your money. I made like a whole TikTok about this and actually did pretty well. If you guys want me to make a podcast episode about like how to save money when you have kids, like there are ways to do it. And I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, it costs so much money to have kids. There are ways around that where you can save a lot of money and still give your kids the best. But so does everything else in life. You know, kids are expensive, but so is everything else. Okay, let's be for real. It's expensive to do anything. It's expensive to breathe air in 2026. It's so expensive, you know. But the beautiful thing about having children young is you get to figure it out as you go. Your kids are growing up, and as they grow up when you're younger and they get more independent, you can get another job when the kids are older, right? Your husband can get established in his career while you take care of the kids, or vice versa. You know, there are ways to work around it when you're young and you have more of energy and time. It's just easier. Like, it's so much easier for me and my husband to work around each other's schedules when you're young versus when you're older and you don't have as much time. You don't have as much energy. You're not, you know, maybe you have a more established career that you can't really work your way around. When you're young, you can figure it out. You know, it's kind of like puzzle pieces together. You can figure it out together. And then stability often comes after responsibility, not before. Like I said, my husband and I are more stable now in our like finances and our marriage than we were before we had our son. Like, having a child really pushes you into maturity and pushes you into stability because you don't really have another choice but to become more stable. Now, those are all my points for why I think it's beneficial to have a child young. Not that these are all things that you should do, but I do believe that having a child young is so rewarding and fulfilling, and it is one of my greatest joys and blessings to be a parent. So I hope this episode gave you some perspective. I'm going to wrap it up because I'm just rambling now. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe so I can keep the episodes going. I post bi-weekly here on YouTube and also on Apple Podcasts. So thank you so much for listening. Love you guys. Connect with me. Live it, Led Maya on all platforms. I see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.